viewers and Alice Walker was born in 1944 to sharecroppers and grew up in rural Georgia, where the book Color Circle. Her work centers around the experiences of Black women in the U.S., stories that have been largely forgotten or ignored, bringing honesty, vulnerability, and empathy to and through her characters, and exposing generations of young people to a world they were absolutely unaware of. The book opens with the words, "Dear God," and the story is told through the protagonist's prayers. The musical opens with the song "Sunday Morning," which is a gospel song, and the characters' understanding of God and themselves remains at the center of the book. Our story is about Celie. When we meet her at the beginning, she is 14 and pregnant with her second child, but who turns out to be her stepfather and not her father, so she did not know that. Even so, she's excited as she names this baby. But just like her firstborn, he's taken from her as soon as he's born and given away. No one speaks well of Celie. Her little sister, Nettie, is the closest person to her, is called beautiful and smart. And a local widower with three children wants to marry him. And instead, their stepfather gives him Celie. And throughout most of the story, musical or book, we simply know him as Mr. Celie and Nettie are separated. Nettie ends up working for a missionary family, raising the missionary children that they serve in Africa. And Celie endures physical, emotional, and sexual abuse at the hands of this man, raising his children and keeping his house. Years pass. One of Mr. Son's Harpo married Sophia. She's in the middle. Sophia refuses to be made small and refuses to take orders. And Celie had never thought about you. Never imagined being able to say. Mrs. occasional mistress comes to town, which might have made things awkward and uncomfortable, but should Avery refuse to let it be so? Should Celie learns about love and sexuality and kindness and intimacy. They love each other. Should was a preacher's daughter and a jazz singer. And she is the one who gives us the title of the book. She says, "I am quoting her, so don't be mad at my language." I think it pisses God off when you walk by a colored circle in the field somewhere and don't notice it. People think pleasing God is all God cares about. But every fool in the world can see it always trying to please us at its business. Just speaks to Celie of God. That God might not be the old white man Celie seems to think God has learned about or thought God was. God wasn't like those with sisters, but instead, He honestly has with the example of Sophia, and should love and understanding and finding letters from Nettie that Mr. had taken from her, that finally gave Celie the courage. I have a picture of gives him the courage to lead him and the courage to say that until he does right by her, everything about him will crumble. In the movie musical, you see that, and in the stage production, Mr. gets his own song as he begins to change. And not to spoil the ending of a book that came out more than 40 years ago. He gets and finds joy in herself and in her community, and she gets her family back. Albert, whom we had known before, but Mr. has a name, Albert, becomes a friend. Shows remains a love, Sophia, a friend, and Nettie comes home. And it turns out the missionaries that Nettie had been caring for were the ones that Keely had given birth to and were given to this couple and saved this family of their own so that their children have too. The color purple is a story about God, about love, about sisterhood, about trauma, healing. It's about black women's tenacity to make a way in a world that tries to make them small. The color purple is an uncomfortable one. It is also a true gift in the way Mary Oliver left us. Someone I loved once gave me a box full of darkness. It took me years to understand that this too was a gift. Writing the song. I want to hand out some paper. As part of this, there's two things. There's some colored pages, and we love colored pages that say God is. What are the positive things that you think about with God? What are the characteristics that bring joy to your heart, that bring comfort, that feed your soul? And maybe they could be things like we said in our call to worship or a prayer of healer of the sick, or bringer of hope, provider of peace. If you need help with that. What are the things that are good? But also, where you have to go to see and understanding of God or yourself that wasn't possible. That doesn't bring joy, that isn't life today, that you maybe need to let go of. Someone told Phoebe that she loved her. She was young, and she was a woman. She had everything going against her. She took that off. Are there things about you that you haven't told about yourself or about God that you need to share? So right now, look at something because there's a lot where to get rid of.
Oh, this morning's readings come from Genesis, chapter 16, verses 7 through 13. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave of Shurai, where have you come from, and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress Shurai, she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. The angel of the Lord also said to her, you are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he will live in hostility towards all his brothers. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. The second reading is from Psalms, chapter 46, verse 46. My God is the cavern in which I hide when the ground under my feet slides away. She is my refuge and my helper. Volcanoes slip into the sea. Waters seize with rage. Mountains tremble, and the solid earth cracks. Yet I am not afraid, protected in the stronghold of Bina. She is a river of joy flowing through the city of the faithful. She is God with us, and she will not be undone. Countries rage, men murder each other, governments fall, evil moves through the land. But when Bina speaks, even the earth hears. She can stop wars and murderous deeds. She can destroy weapons and restore peace. Come and see the wonders she does. She forces enemies to talk. She gives honor to the ashamed. She makes the selfish share their wealth. She makes the deaf listen and the callous cry. Like the rocks melting under volcanoes, they melt under her power. Put an end to your fighting and know me as God. I rule over the earth and all obey my wishes. The god Bina is like the raging bear protecting her cubs from the murdering wolf. Her fury will not be restrained. She is the queen of all that is. She is praised by her cosmic creation and exacts homage from her creatures.
Abundant, loving God, may our words and our thoughts and our reflections be a blessing to you this day and every day and always. Amen. As quickly as the book, The Color Purple, became beloved, not the book beloved, that's also delightful. Ugh. Excellent, delightful is probably the wrong word. It was added to a list of banned books, with beloved, as it turns out. It was added to the list of banned books in many places where it often remains today. And there have been different reasons for this book being banned, including religious objections, homosexuality, violence, African history, rape, incest, drug abuse, explicit language, and sexual scenes. But folks are also banning The Hobbit for satanic imagery, written by J.R.R. Tolkien, a very devout Catholic. So not really sure how much stock to put in anything that is said. But to be fair, The Color Purple is kind of an unsettling story. And I think it should be unsettling to see a story of a young girl going through these years and years of abuse. The portion of the story in our reading today is just a portion of the story of Hagar. She does go back to the house of Sarah and Abraham, who received the promised lineage that they will be a great nation, and their change of name from Abram to Abraham and Sarai to Sarah. For 4 years, Hagar lived with Abraham and Sarah in that time, and the covenant was fulfilled through Sarah. Sarah became pregnant with Isaac, and Sarah could not allow Hagar and Ishmael to hang around with the possibility of the promises and the inheritance that Sarah knew was Isaac's accidentally getting away from him and going to Ishmael. So in chapter 21, Hagar doesn't run away. She is in fact sent away by Sarah with her son, whom she had just weaned at about 4 years old, with a little water and a little bread into the wilderness. And we know the wilderness is a terrifying and treacherous place. And when the food had been eaten and the water had run out, Hagar gives what little is left to her child, places him under a tree, and filled with tears and grief, she walks away because he is dying and she cannot watch. Hagar is a side character in the Bible. Hers is not the story that we will follow for centuries and generations until they are made a people. Hers is not the name of victory or valor. Hers is not the story given as one of faithfulness. In fact, throughout Christian history, many theologians, many men throughout Christian history have pitted, much like Sarah did, Sarah and Hagar against each other, naming Sarah as faithful and honorable and true, and Hagar as synonymous with faithlessness, wrath, and sin. The question always comes up for me, though. Why is this story even in here? I understand Sarah's desperation for a child and for the fulfillment of the promises that she was given. But I don't think this story makes Sarah look very good. In fact, I think it makes her look cruel. And she forced a woman to have sex with her husband, to have a child, and then immediately regret that decision and treat the woman cruelly, and then ultimately send the woman and the child out into the wilderness to die. But also, Abraham and Sarah were from Ur, which is like the southern half of Iraq. And Hagar was from Egypt. Abraham and Sarah were nomadic and wealthy with many slaves and animals traveling around, meeting kings throughout the area, and Hagar was Sarah's slave, probably one of many. And having narratives of slaves is incredibly uncommon. Having their perspective, their movements, their voice is unusual. Slavery in the United States existed after the printing press existed, and literacy was well on its rise throughout the world. And still, most of the slave narratives we have were those that were passed down or given as oral memories, either hand-scribed or recorded in the waning years of people's lives. They say that history is written by the victor, but history is also written by those who have the privilege of time and resources and knowledge and even power. The stories of people living in deep poverty or deep trauma, those who are just trying to get by each and every day, are rarely given ink to paper unless they're coming from some place of privilege. Like I write about somebody else's trauma. And so these stories are unpleasant. They tell us of experiences we don't normally expect or feel or are part of. Hagar ran pregnant into the wilderness. And it's uncomfortable. Now, I don't know what God or gods Hagar worshiped before, but at some point in her life, she met the God of Abraham and Sarah. No. But the God of Abraham and Sarah met this foreign slave who was not part of the adopted family, the chosen people of God, was not going to be the central narrative of all of the drama, and yet God met Hagar in a wilderness place. In desperation, God saw her. In all of her pain and her grief and her fear, God heard her laments. God heard her laments and her cries, probably her anger, and God met her there. I wonder if before that moment, what she had thought or known of Abraham's God. Was she required to worship the God of Abraham and his family? Did she think that their God was cruel, like Sarah, or complacent, like Abraham, who just told Sarah to do whatever she wanted? Was it with bitterness in her mouth that she might have spoken of the God of Abraham and Sarah for the suffering that she had gone through? Yet, God met her in the wilderness. In her need, in her lament, God saw her. When she was seen by the God of her masters and her owners, when you know who worships a God, you can often make assumptions about who that God is. Why would Abraham's God care about the people that Abraham doesn't seem to care about? And yet, God is more and God sees. Even before Moses hears God's name from the top of a mountain from a fiery bush, Hagar names God, the God who sees. This is the God who sees and is moved, the God who sees and cares, the God who sees and answers, the God who sees and gives promises, the God who sees the outcast and the marginalized and the neglected, the abused, the lonely, the forgotten, the used. This is the God who sees and loves. For Seeley, God looked like the powerful, like the men who had abused her, like the men who held power, like the men who sought control. And it's the 1920s and 30s in the South, so it was the white men in positions of power. The book is a little more explicit that is how she understood God. And it was Shug who met her in her wilderness when she did not feel God cared. Shug saw her and told her about the God who is everything and is in everything and loves everything, that our God wants our delight, the God who makes purple and surprises us with flowers and the music of birds and trees and dance and love. Alice Walker would say that Seeley is based on the life, this is her quote, Seeley is based on the life of my grandmother Rachel, a kind and loving woman beautifully abused by my grandfather. It is safe to say, after a frightful life serving and obeying abusive men who raped in the place of making love, my grandmother, like Seeley, was not attracted to men. She was, in fact, very drawn to my grandfather's lover, a beautiful woman who was kind to her, and the only grown person who ever seemed to notice how remarkable and creative she was. In Seeley's final song, which we will hear, and in the final prayer she writes in the book, her prayer to God in the story that we have, she prays, "Dear God, dear stars, dear trees, dear sky, dear peoples, dear everything, dear God. God is inside of me and everyone else that was or ever will be. I came into this world with God, and when I finally looked inside, I found it, just as close as my breath is to me." Being seen and known, being seen and cared for, being seen and loved, that changes everything. It changes each of us, and that changes where we see God in the world. And I hope we see God in all of creation and in the face of every friend and neighbor and stranger, that we see what God sees and we see as God sees, and that we live as those who follow the God of love. So, for a few minutes, I invite you at your tables to have a little discussion. And they're on the same theme, but you can pick and share as you feel comfortable. How have you thought about God at different times in your life, and who taught you about that God? What names for God would you give? Think about those characteristics that you love about God. And if you are the image of God in the world, what do you want people to know about God by the life you live? And let's be honest, are there things you want to change to make sure that image is who you believe God to be?